I think that first generation immigrants feel this a lot. Oldest daughters feel this a lot.
Yeah.
I am an only child, so I feel that kind of pressure, the hope of the family. But also in the US, my family, my mom's side of the family was a part of the civil rights movement. So literally, I was the success that my grandfather and my mom had opened the doors for me to be able to become. Right. I was the dream realized that I could go to law school and that I could start my own business, that I could become a professor in this integrated world. But at some point, I had to recognize, and I'm grateful that I did, that they actually sacrificed and worked for me to be able to have a choice. But now I was able to stand on the opportunity that actually gave me a choice. Do I want to continue with this or do I want to explore something else? So, yes, there was a lot of pressure, but what I recognized is that I had to reconcile it within myself first. So then I could tell my mom and answer her questions without second guessing myself so much.
Welcome to What Was, What Next. This is a podcast about the seasons of change that shape our lives. I'm Hina Thacker, and in each episode, I sit down with someone who has stepped away from what once was, be it a career, a role, a relationship, an identity, and is now finding their way through the uncertain space of what comes next. These are not stories of perfect reinvention. They're honest conversations about the in-between seasons, the moments when the old life no longer fits and the new one hasn't fully formed. If you're navigating a transition of your own, you're not alone. There are many of us who have navigated through those same waters. So let's begin the conversation for today.
Welcome to What Was, What Next? And my guest today is Asha. And I would love, Asha, for you to just introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us who you are.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm delighted to be here. Happy to connect. My name is Asha Wilkerson, and I love the question of who I am because where I moved from, the United States of America, the first question is always, what do you do?
Yeah.
And so now who am I? I am a healer. I am somebody who tries to live the way that I feel on a regular basis. I wrote down in my journal years ago that the personal development work that I want to do for myself, I want to do for other people as well. The books that I read for myself, I want to be able to use them in my work. And what that has culminated into is me being a space holder at a healing studio specifically focused on the African diaspora and people of color in Lisbon, Portugal, also called Asha's Place.
Sounds very, very lovely. So before Asha's Place, Lisbon, you said you were in the United States. What was your life like then?
Yes. So yes, I was in the United States. I was in California in the Bay Area. So busy, busy, busy. I was a licensed attorney. I still am a licensed attorney in California, but I don't use it very much. And I was running a full-time paralegal program at a community college in Sacramento. So my days were spent in law and in academia. I would travel up to Sacramento, which was about an hour and 15 minutes away. I would stay 2 nights, work 3 days up there, then come back to Oakland, try and get a little bit of space, live my life, and then do it all over again the following week. But actually, when I decided that that was no longer aligned for me, we were in the pandemic and we had started teaching online and running everything online, which felt like a big break. But then it also felt like I didn't get a break because now there was no transition from doing the work and being at home. It was just kind of always available.
Yeah. Yeah. And so to make that leap, what kind of started to feel slightly misaligned, or so even if externally you looked successful, what started to change for you that you wanted to make this leap?
Yeah. For me in the pandemic, Obviously, it was a tragedy and it was a huge weight on the shoulders of people around the world and a terrible experience to have gone through. But for me, when we had to be inside and to sit down, I realized how tired I was. I was on that wheel of always being on the go, and I knew that I was tired, but I didn't have enough time to slow down to really recognize how tired I was. So that was the first clue, but I didn't see it necessarily as a clue that something was aligned. It was just kind of a, oh my gosh, I'm actually really tired. And then at some point, even though I liked teaching online better than I liked physically being in the classroom, I was just irritated and annoyed. I didn't want to read the emails. I wasn't thinking about my classes in between actually showing up. I was annoyed that I had so many papers to grade. And it was a really sort of challenging realization to recognize that point because when I started teaching, it was my dream job. I had always wanted to be a teacher, always knew that I was going to be a teacher. I found myself teaching in different capacities, whether it was exercise or teaching adjunct. And so when I started, it was aligned. So to recognize that it might not be aligned anymore was a real sort of come to Jesus moment, as they say, like a real facing yourself in the mirror. And I was on a hike with a friend of mine and I was telling her about my frustration or sort of annoyance. And she looked at me and she said, Asha, why don't you just quit? I said, quit? It had never occurred to me. Who in my family ever just quits? Nobody just quits. Are you kidding? It's a good government job. It has retirement. It's something I had worked for. It's respected. It's respectful. How could I even just quit? But my friend planted that seed and I started thinking about, okay, if I didn't do this anymore, what could I possibly do? What would I possibly do? And that's really how that this journey got started.
Amazing. We all need those people in our lives, don't we, Asha, that kind of do plant seeds and do even give us a kick as and when needed. And that support network is so important when you're going through stuff like this, aren't you? So what happened then? So she planted the seed. How did that grow?
Yeah. Well, first, I was actually really stuck in my thinking because I thought I only know how to do law and I only know how to teach. And if I move to another state, I have to take the bar again. And I don't really want to do that, nor do I really want to practice law anymore. What could I do? I felt really restricted by the profession and the licensure, which was interesting because I chose law because I figured it would give me the biggest platform to jump off of into many different areas. But after I'd had a number of years of experience, I felt really pigeonholed in what I could do. And the transformation really started to happen when I started writing about how I wanted to feel and what I wanted to experience, not so much what I wanted to do, because I realized that I was limited by what I knew. But if I tapped into the feelings of how I wanted to wake up, how I wanted to feel when I was doing the work, if I wanted to work at all, what I wanted to experience, what I wanted to feel like learning new languages, that then I could dream of a world where I was feeling good first and then see what opportunities met those feelings instead of trying to put myself into a job that then gave me access to those feelings.
Such an important distinction. I'm curious, Asha, it's almost like there's a voice that says stay and there's the voice that says leave. And then in that mix, you started writing about how you wanted to feel. Did that feeling translate to your body? Like, were you experiencing some of that embodiment of some of the words that you were writing?
When I started writing, I noticed how I felt differently in my body. I felt expansive. I felt excited. I felt like, oh, if this could really happen, this would be lovely. And then I would drop back into reality and recognize I didn't feel those feelings was, which was great information. And so what ended up happening is that those feelings became the filter through which I evaluated opportunities because my logical brain was saying, well, Asha, you're teaching online, so maybe you can just move to a different place. Maybe you can move to an island. Maybe you could move to another part of the US and keep doing the work, but do it in a different location. But what I realized is that the work was no longer aligned, or at least the structure of the work was no longer aligned. So it didn't matter where I moved to if I was still doing the same thing. I was actually ready to do something different. And so my feelings became the filter or sort of the beacon, the North Star. But I don't think I would have recognized that. I would have continued to repeat the pattern of this is a good job, or I make this amount of money, or I can travel when I want to, and would have continued repeating the same patterns of doing the things that I was supposed to do, even though they weren't fulfilling to me and they didn't feel good to me anymore, as opposed to thinking, okay, I know that it's possible for me to feel this way because I'm dreaming about it, I'm thinking about it, and I can feel it in my body. So now I can use my body to recognize when I'm in those spaces because I've already recognized the feeling when I'm journaling. And so now when I encounter it in real life, I'm going to know that it's true, that I'm here, I'm in that right position or right circumstance. And if I don't feel that, then that's telling me that I haven't quite gotten to the feeling that I know is possible.
Okay. So having made the move, because you didn't just move a career, you moved countries, you relocated. What was that like? What was it like? So first of all, um, Asha, was there a challenge with communicating your decision to leave law, to leave the security, I guess, and the visible signs of success that obviously other people could see?
At first, I had to really reconcile that within myself. But I also feel like when we're ready to move, we'll be ready to move. And so I had gotten to that point where it was just so clear to me that I couldn't stay, that it mattered. Like I didn't want to disappoint my mom or my family. And I still kind of thought about what other people might say because even though I wasn't caught up on being an attorney, but I was caught up on, maybe I should say, what it represented still had an effect on me. So it wasn't because I thought that being an attorney was great, but there's only like 3,000 Black attorneys in the United States. It's a really, really small number. And so when I would walk into a courtroom or show up as an attorney, it is also helping to break the stereotype and the barrier that is not just about me in particular, but is about how people who look like me are represented. Right. There's also a really high statistical number of women who leave the legal profession after 7 years. And so I thought about that. Am I just someone who couldn't make it? Am I making a choice because I'm not tough enough to stick it out? Or am I making a choice because this is no longer aligned with what I want? So it was some of those thoughts about what I should do and how I'm being represented, which are voices that weren't mine. I didn't really care, but also I had to understand and come to terms with I've been oriented in the world as a professor and attorney for a number of years. Now, how am I going to orient myself in the world? And leaving the United States, the country that shaped me, leaving the community allowed me to explore different identities without worrying about or knowing what I thought people would assume about me. And I grew up more background about that. I grew up as the only Black kid in my neighborhood. My mom was the only Black administrator in our school district that we lived in. And so I was highly visible as a child and even as an adult in Oakland or in the Bay Area that was more diverse. So people always saw me. And I learned very early on as a child that I had to understand what people thought about me. So then I could know how to show up in the spaces. It was never about how I just wanted to show up. It was always conditioned on what the majority would think about me. So, and it was also tied to safety because I had to protect my mom's reputation. She had to protect her reputation so that nothing came back to her on as negative on her job, which then would affect her ability to earn income, which would affect her ability to provide for me. So this, I could call it a preoccupation or maybe a concern with how I was perceived in the world was taught to me early on because of our position, not just in the world and in society, but literally in our neighborhood, in my mom's career, profession, and the private school that I went to. And so I that was always a constant thought that it can be helpful, but also very limiting. So for me, leaving countries even though in the beginning it took me a minute, I would say, oh, I just resigned from teaching full time and I teach part time. Like I would still sort of give the
Yeah.
credentials because I wasn't comfortable.
Yeah.
But after a while, I was like, nobody cares. And everybody else is in transition and they're not from the US. And they're like, cool, figure it out. It was a totally different expectation and cultural conditioning. And it really gave me the freedom to explore and to kind of flop around and figure it out without feeling like I was disappointing or being judged by people.
Yeah. I just want to ask, Asha, from listening to you, it almost feels like, did you ever have that question of whether you're allowed to do this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that first generation immigrants feel this a lot. Oldest daughters feel this a lot.
Yeah.
I am an only child, so I feel that kind of pressure, the hope of the family, but also in the US, my family, my mom's side of the family was a part of the civil rights movement. My mom integrated the University of Mississippi. My grandfather worked alongside Medgar Evers and Martin Luther King Jr. And so they were instrumental in gaining rights for Black people in the United States, which then also opened the door for all people of color. Because once Black people gained rights in the US, then other people of color and women could benefit from those rights as well. So literally, I was the success that my grandfather and my mom had opened the doors for me to be able to become. Right. I was the dream realized that I could go to law school and that I could start my own business, that I could become a professor in this integrated world. And the tools or the pathway that they saw to freedom was through either a government job, through becoming a CEO of a corporation, right? These things that felt very prestigious because those were the tools that they knew. But at some point, I had to recognize, and I'm grateful that I did, that they actually sacrificed and worked for me to be able to have a choice. And that the tool that they knew at the time was to go to school, get the education, get the good job, work it for 30 or 40 years and retire and die content. That's what they knew. That was the opportunity that was before them. But now I was able to stand on the opportunity that actually gave me a choice. Do I want to continue with this or do I want to explore something else? So yes, there was a lot of pressure, but what I recognized is that I had to reconcile it within myself first. So then I could tell my mom and answer her questions without second guessing myself so much.
Yeah. It's so I guess second, third generation children of people who emigrated to different countries, made their lives elsewhere. There is that question of they worked so hard, um, and now I'm going against the tide that they helped create. And therefore, am I doing the right thing? But it's actually because they worked so hard, as you said, that you have the choice to be able to live your life in a different way.
Mhm.
My sister-in-law, I remember my sister-in-law, she's a doctor, and she said to me, I was told that the way out of that, you know, level of income that they were in as immigrants and was to work hard to get a good education, to get a good job with good benefits and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely a dilemma that goes on in our hearts as well as our minds when we're thinking of,
Certainly.
you know, and your transition then, it wasn't really just a career transition, was it? It was a lot deeper than that.
It was much deeper. But also, I want to mention just a little bit about what you said about, our parents working hard. And just to reiterate that it's important for us to do our own internal work. And sometimes we have to separate a little bit from the family to be able to do that because, again, the methods, the advice, the work hard, those are the tools that they had for the time that they were in. Now, also, my cousin and I were just talking the other day about how our uncle like really has no concept of working online
Yeah.
or remote work, right?
Yeah.
He was an electrician for 42, 43 years. And so he always went to a physical location to do his job. And when we go and visit him, we might say, hey, we have a call or we're working. But there's a part of him that just kind of thinks we're downstairs hanging out on the computer
Yeah.
and it like doesn't compute that you could be sitting in a chair all day long and still bring value and earn money. And those things just weren't available. And when we think about the history of colonization or the history in the world, we literally in the slave fields or in indentured servitude situations, there was no rest. You had to keep being busy. And so this concept of hard work was formulated to stay too busy for you to sit down, because if you sit down and get some rest, then you get to think about your conditions. And so these are adaptations that our parents and grandparents have told us, keep working hard, keep working hard. One, thinking that if we work hard enough, we'll be recognized for the work that we do. And that is not always, correlation is not causation. That's not always a true thing. And two, that working hard is what's going to get us there. But I really had to evaluate my relationship with hard work, because it also made me think that work or success had to be hard, that it had to be, hard fought to come to me, as opposed to smart work or efficient work or easy work, things that are like naturally aligned with me, that success or the things that I'm working towards can come easily and naturally if I am working in alignment with myself and with the things around me. And that everything has to be so hard. Right? So it's important to separate and understand the survival phrases, strategies, techniques that were passed on to us that are contextual, and how can we extract what we need from them today and also leave the burden that they can be because they no longer apply for the time that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just makes me think then. So definitely my son has a tattoo on his forearm of his two grandfathers. And it's just the most beautiful likeness. And it says courage, because my son feels like it took great courage on the part of his grandparents to make the move and to start again in a different place. And essentially you've done that as well, Asha, because you've moved countries and careers. And I just wonder, what does success mean to you now, in the way that you have chosen to live your life that's different from how they might have defined success?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it can throw you for a loop when you step out of the matrix. Because when you're working for somebody, when you're in the institution, the success is already defined for you. It's getting the next promotion, it's becoming the head of the company, the head of the school. And so when you step out of that and begin to design your own life, you really get to decide what you want to call success. And it takes some intentional effort to decouple from the traditional markers of success. So you can still use money as a marker of success, but you can also use mental freedom. You can use control over your own day. You can use alignment, doing the things that you want to do when you want to do them. You could use adventure as a sign of success. So for me, I made a promise to myself that this chapter of my life would be intuitively led, and that I would follow the feelings that are in my body, the wisdom in my body, the wisdom from my guides, and to not be so logical and overthink.
Yeah.
Some days I win, some days I don't, but the amount of peace that I feel, and I'm not always, my nervous system is not always regulated, because I am building a business here and that pulls up some things still from childhood. But the amount of just peace and sort of daily satisfaction I feel by doing the things that are in alignment far surpass the gratification that I felt before I left. But I also want to say too, I did feel really satisfied with my life and with my career until it wasn't aligned. And so I'm not one of those people that lived a whole life doing things that I didn't want to do. I I think I'm someone who pivots when it's uncomfortable, trying to find the next thing. And then when it's not aligned anymore, I go find something different. But it had never been as big as leaving the career completely and moving to a new country.
Yeah.
So success gets to be whatever you decide you want it to be.
Yeah. When I was retraining my mind about the markers of success, and I just started using the word fulfillment, like, do I feel fulfilled with the way I live? Do I put my head on my pillow at night and think, that was a lovely day. That was a good day, you know, and if I do, then I
Mhm.
feel like that was good for me. So I was just wondering, if you're building a new business, I'd love to hear a little bit about that. What did you, I know it's a wellness business, but I'll let you talk about that. What did you discover about yourself in the process of building this new business?
Yeah. I discovered, well, a couple things made sense. So I've been an entrepreneur since 2011. I started my own law practice, more out of I guess I'll do this now than than a real desire to become a business owner. And then that morphed as I can look back and see that I was trying to pivot away from law. I started doing business coaching with a legal background. Then I did business coaching with a mindset background. Then I added some spirituality and some Reiki into it. And then eventually I found my way into life coaching. And then it became a healer, right? That does 2 or 3 month packages, and all of those evolutions felt a little bit, they felt like I was getting closer, but not that I was 100% there. What I realized running this business, because I designed it to be exactly what I needed for myself. So, as people of color, maybe in England, definitely in the United States, it is, you have to be intentional about finding your pockets of people, and you can often feel that and often be the only one in the room. You know, there are a number of times that I was checking in at the attorney line in court, and the sheriff's deputies would come over to me and tell me that I couldn't be there because they would assume that I was the defendant, right? And so there are many messages that subtle and also blatant, that you don't quite belong, or that you took somebody else's spot, or you're here but are you qualified to be here? And to just find a space that felt like a safe space where you didn't have to show up and put on a mask or show up as the attorney or as the professor, or as the doctor, or as the professional one, where you didn't have to worry about what people thought, but could just show up, was really, really important to me. And I thought that that would be really, really helpful, because even though I was a member of the Black Attorneys Association, it's still a professional association. And so you still have to mind how you show up, right?
Yeah.
And all of the people who were in the healing space that I had contact with weren't necessarily Black folks, or if they were, it was related to the church. And I started to drift away from religion because religion felt very restrictive and not as expansive as I wanted to feel. And so I thought, okay, well, I've learned all these different things about energy, about spirituality, about life in general. I want to be in community with other people who are like me, or who are questioning, who have some kind of spiritual religious background, but also have some logic. And they're like, these things don't make sense. And we can have these conversations. And so when I found this space, it was very clear to me that this was the kind of business that I needed to operate. This was the kind of community that I wanted to create. And then that ended up becoming a business.
Yeah. Yeah. And now when you wake up and you are attending to the business that you've created now, what's different in the way you walk, you talk? What's your aura? What do you think's different now?
Well, I think I had said earlier that when I was writing, I said that I didn't want there to be a difference or a separation between who I was and what I did. And if I didn't mention that, that's exactly what I would write about when I started dreaming or just journaling about, how do I want to wake up? How do I want to feel? I want to be the same Asha at home as I am at the studio, as I am with my friends. Whereas before I felt like, okay, here's Asha when I wake up. Now I'm going to go put on my attorney hat. Now I'm going to take a break and just be the me that loves to dance and have a good time. Now I'm going to go put on my professor hat and have to have all the answers. And then now I'm going to come back and spend time with my friends. And I just wanted to be me in all of those areas. I didn't want to have to pretend to know all of the answers. I wanted to pull tarot cards at home and pull them in the studio. I wanted to have the same deep conversations with my friends that I was having with people who might come to learn more. And so really, the business is an expression of me and the things that I am interested in. And instead of trying to fit myself into a model, because I've had many people who have talked to me about, okay, well, how can we get more people in here? What can we do? People automatically, and even myself too, sometimes we go to, okay, well, this is like a fitness studio. or like a yoga studio. So here's what they do, but it's not. We have yoga, but it's not a yoga studio, right? We have classes, but it's not only classes about spirituality. Sometimes we have salsa, but it's not just a dance studio, right? And so I'm really creating a business and a model that just reflects all the things that I'm interested in, which then also resonates with people who also have multifaceted interests, from dance to yoga to herbs to tarot to all of the things that we do that's there.
Yeah.
So when I mentioned that I promised myself that this chapter of my life would be led with intuition, I also promised myself that I would build this business with intuition. And what that also meant is that I ended up unsubscribing from a lot of the business coaches and the traditional advice that I had been following as an attorney and as a business owner, because while it may have worked for some people, it was not aligned with what I was trying to do. And I had to really, really trust myself. And a lot of times I didn't, but every time I would go back to, okay, this feels right for me, then it would work better than, okay, you need to market this way. You need to be on Instagram. I don't like Instagram. I don't want to be there.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Definitely. And it's very easy to get back or to fall back, I would say sometimes, because between what was my life and what is my life now, there were many stages where I would try something and it wouldn't work. And I would try
Hmm.
something and then I would go down the rabbit hole of, maybe I'm not doing this right. So maybe I need to resubscribe to some of those business gurus or things like that. But it's very interesting, that what you said about just showing up as who you are in all aspects of life, whether you're meeting your friend for a coffee or you're running a session for something or you're talking on a podcast. I work in the executive coaching space, but I also want to bring my whole self to that. And I put up on my website, Asha, there's a picture of me with some tarot cards. I debated long and hard. And the girl who was helping me with my website at the time, she was like, are you sure? Because executives, they're not going to know what this is. And I was like, well, I will, hopefully that will spark curiosity in them and they'll ask me and then I'll be able to say what it means to me. So I think you've just articulated that so beautifully about just turning up in all areas of your life as the whole person.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the goals. Bring your whole self to the table. That's what I wanted to do for myself. And that's what I would coach other people to do or tell other people to do, because we we shave off so much of ourselves to fit into the systems. But when we bring our whole selves, we get to be all of our magical selves.
Yeah.
And I was pleasantly surprised when I moved to Portugal, and it was probably my own freedom to say, oh, I do Reiki, or oh, I do breath work. It was like, oh, I'm so interested, or I do it too. And I was just shocked that people were also into the same kind of things, because I wasn't into it before and didn't have the community in the Bay Area. And I would have hesitated more to say it because I was afraid of what people would think who knew me as the attorney or who knew me as the professor. Oh, she's lost it. What is she doing? She's gone crazy. But being in a new place, I got to just jump into what felt more aligned, and people, to my surprise, met it excitedly. They were like, "Oh
Yeah.
yeah, me too."
Wow. Yeah. And they do say that you attract your tribe to you, right? So it's like you're emitting that energy and that aura, and that's what attracts like-minded people to your space.
100% true.
Yeah. So tell us about Asha's Place then. Tell us about the kind of people that you find walking through the doors.
Absolutely. So Asha's Place is a healing place, a space for healing and well-being for the African diaspora and for people of color. And I'm very clear about that because we're often told that we could just make ourselves comfortable in these other spaces, but it's rare that we find spaces that prioritize our comfort first. So that means foods that are familiar, smells and scents that are familiar and feel good, instructors that reflect us, our body shapes, our body sizes, the color of our skin, music that feels aligned and culturally relevant, topics of conversation, topics of workshops that are just unique to our needs and our interests. And people always go, well, what about white people or non-Black people? Anyone who aligns with that, anyone who is comfortable with the mission and the prioritization of Black people and people of color is welcome. And one thing that I've also found pleasantly surprising is that even if you're not Black or a person of color, people feel really comfortable because the intention is to make everybody feel comfortable, not to require somebody to feel comfortable in a different space. So in education, we talk about teaching, not to say that we have any deficit, because I don't believe that we do, but we talk about teaching to the person who needs it the most makes it easier to understand for everybody. So in the world, when you are prioritizing the comfort of the people who need to feel the safest, it makes everybody else feel safe as well. So I really like that. So we're located in Lisbon in a neighborhood called Barrio Alto, which is kind of funny because it's definitely a party neighborhood. But as soon as you step in, you feel the peace and the calmness of the studio. There's a little garden out in the back where people can sit and have coffee or tea, just relax and have a conversation. I also run retreats out of the studio because there's an apartment that's attached. And so I have a 4-day healing retreat for women who are burned out, tired, exhausted, and just need to feel for a couple of days. So in that retreat, I meet with people and figure out what it is that they really want to work on. Some are coming to work on grief. Some are coming to work on expansion. Some are coming because they're just exhausted and just want to feel held. We plan breakfast and lunch for them and curate a healing journey with talking activities, maybe like tarot or conversation, but also with somatic practices as well, like breath work or massage or Reiki that will help move people through this healing journey in about 4 days. And if you're just interested in coming to visit the studio and want a place to stay in Lisbon and feel like supporting the business, so we also have a stay option, which is just like renting a hotel room where you get a discount on some of the services at the studio, but it's your own journey. It's not a curated healing journey like Held is. And if you're wanting to connect, you can check it out on Instagram and TikTok, Asha's Place Lisbon. If you're wanting to connect with me personally, I'm hanging out more on Threads. I love that platform now. I love the conversation, the community that's building over there. And my handle over there is Asha Wilkerson, ESQ.
What you created, it sounds like a haven of possibility, like what is possible for my life going forward if I give myself this luxury of being in that space. So it does sound wonderful.
And you did ask me how people feel when they come in, and it's almost like they feel relief. They feel seen, they feel welcomed, they feel peace. I mean, a number of people have said just entering the doors, wow.
So having created this sanctuary, this haven, and made that leap, what would you say to somebody who's still in that space of something doesn't quite fit anymore, but they're not yet ready to make a move?
I would tell them to start dreaming, start journaling and dreaming, start imagining how they want to feel. And if for some folks who are really deep in it, the feelings are hard to access for them. And so I give them a little workaround that if they were to write a story about themselves as if they're a third person, how would Asha wake up? And it just gives enough distance that you're not caught up on what you feel or don't feel, but you're able to dream sort of on behalf of yourself as this, like from a bird's eye view. So I tell people to start there. And the second thing that's important is to recognize what your nervous system is doing, because there are a number of people who want to move but feel terrified, or they want to know what the outcome is. And your nervous system is incredibly diligent about keeping you safe. And anything that is new is considered unsafe for us. And so it's important to spend a little bit of time recognizing what is our nervous system trying to tell us, and then to think about, okay, am I feeling this way? Am I feeling really anxious because I'm actually going to be unsafe, or is it just because it's unfamiliar? And when you recognize the things that are unfamiliar, then you have years of practice of making the unfamiliar familiar. You went to school for the first time. You walked into a new gym for a first time. You met somebody for a first time. Those were all unfamiliar things or events or people. And then with more repetition, they became familiar and a part of your practice and your dreams, your desires, the next chapter of your life that you want to write but maybe feel scared to put pen to paper will soon become familiar with you the more you spend time writing, dreaming, thinking, because you're adjusting your nervous system so that it becomes familiar before it even gets there.
Wonderful, wonderful words of wisdom there. So reflecting on that, Asha, what part of your story is there that's not fully finished?
Yeah, that's a very timely question, especially since I'm rereading The Big Leap, which also just matches the language or uses different language to talk about some of the things that I work with my clients about. But in The Big Leap, Gay Hendricks talks about an upper limit problem, which is also your nervous system trying to keep you safe. And there's 4 different barriers that come up. And the one that is top of mind for me is the worthiness problem, the worthiness limit, which also maps to psychology and maps to this energy work, right? And for those of us who have grown up similarly to being a minority in society, you're conditioned early on to prove your worth. Depending on how we land in our families, we might be a child that always had to get good grades to get some attention, or we had to please a parent, maybe who was abusive or not as emotionally stable so that we wouldn't get in trouble. We learn these adaptive strategies, but they also tell us that we have to earn what we want. We have to earn love. We have to earn the food. We have to earn the success. We have to earn. But at some point, we must all realize that we are just worthy of the hopes, dreams, and desires that we have. And of course, I can tell that to other people and I know it logically, but sinking into my body is I'm still integrating that part for me. So what happens is I will receive a compliment or achieve something like the studio just celebrated its 1 year anniversary. And then I undercut it with something. Yeah, but this is not here yet. This is not there yet. And I need to do this. And so I am still working on really living in the moment and allowing myself to experience all of the good things that I'm calling in and to not undercut my experience by worry or criticism that are unhelpful and really useless. And that comes back to this worthiness thing of, okay, it needs to be hard work, or I'm always going to have to prove it, or maybe I don't deserve it because of what my family sacrificed for. And now here I am trying to create this life of ease. And am I betraying their sacrifices and their work and the things that they have worked for me to do? And these are all, I'm able to articulate them, but these are all the subconscious thoughts that are running under the background, even though on a daily basis, I am building the life that I want. I'm creating the business that I love. I'm doing the things that I set out to do. So my work is still, I think, from both sides of my family to rectify that worthiness piece so that I can stand in it and to not minimize or reject or block the good things that come my way.
Oh my goodness, Asha, thank you for sharing that, because I think there's a lot there that many people will recognize as something that's standing in their own way, is perhaps a ceiling that they are also pushing up against. Do you have thoughts around how you might recognize that you've broken through that ceiling?
I think I will recognize it when I can stand there and receive a compliment or recognize an achievement, and not necessarily a traditional achievement or you've hit this amount of money, but to say, oh, the business has been open for a year. Yeah, that's incredible. Or to look in the room and see the number of people have showed up, or even that any person showed up to meet me in this idea for business without criticizing it, without making an excuse, without saying, oh, it should be something different, to just let it land. And that's it. To not have anything else to say about it, but like, yeah, okay, all right. And that's a pattern interruption. I also recognized a few years back that I never really just saw my mom take a compliment. even now when people say, "Oh, I really like your shirt." "Oh, this old thing," or and I would do that too. "I like your dress." "Oh, I got it at Ross." It's
Yeah.
a discount store in the US. "It was $10."
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
minimize
Yeah.
it, right? And
Yeah.
so it becomes this pattern that we don't even think of, we're not even consciously aware of, but it totally minimizes what we have willfully done
Mm.
and either gives the credit to somebody or something else or undercuts the recognition or really the power of recognizing that, no, I've done this.
Yeah.
This was my goal and I achieved it. I don't
Yeah.
have to minimize that. I can stand fully in it and that's okay. I'm not going to get criticized. And if I do, who cares? I'm not going to get cut down. I'm not going to, whatever all of the things that it touches on, like don't have to be true
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. It reminds me, Asha, of my friend Jane's daughter, Emily, which she's sort of in her late 20s now, but when she was 3, I hadn't seen her for a few months. And I met up with them and I said, "Oh, Emily, you are just gorgeous." And she said, "Auntie Hina, everybody says that." And I feel like, oh my gosh, she just stood in her own power and she just
Mhm.
was like accepting, well, I must be
Mhm.
gorgeous. It's just that whole, the innocence of that childhood, but just accepting that if somebody's saying that to me, yes, I'm gonna own that kind of thing.
You're right. Yeah, a friend of mine does work with nonprofits and organizational leadership and development and often does workshops with them. And she splits people into groups and they have to give each other compliments. And you have to say, "That's true about me. Thanks." And she says it is so uncomfortable for people because we're so used to just deflecting, especially women. We're so used to deflecting. And so sometimes when I remember, I think in my head, "That's true about me. Thanks." And it's uncomfortable, but I think the more that we practice and hold that, then the more we start to believe it because then it just becomes a practice, just like the denial becomes a practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you just said, it is maybe just a habit that we just feel like, oh, we're not supposed to talk about ourselves in that way or just say, well,
Mhm.
actually, I am good at that. But no, that is just a, a very, very important insight for us all, Asha. So thank you for articulating that in the conversation today. I'm sure that everybody listening is going to get so much, actually just joy from hearing your story, to be honest. So thank you for that. Thank you for showing up. I wish you so much love and success. I'm definitely popping into Lisbon at some stage. Just peek round the doors and say hello to you.
Yes, please do. I cannot wait to have that happen.
Oh,
Thank you for the invitation, for the conversation. It has been great to just be able to share the airspace with you. So I
yeah.
really appreciate that.
No, thank you. And we're going to catch up soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you so much for listening to What Was, What Next. Every story that we share here is a reminder that life moves in seasons and that the space between what was and what comes next is not a failure, but part of the journey. So if this conversation resonated with you, please do share it with someone who might need to hear it as well. Until next time, take care of yourselves in whatever season you're in. And remember, the season that makes no sense today may be the one that shapes the future for you. So embrace it in all its glory. Till next time.